It wasn't the oil revenue. It wasn't the ideology of the state. It wasn't even the iron grip of the security services. It was the architecture of the money. Itself, history is littered with fallen empires. Nations collapse, borders are redrawn, currencies dissolve into dust. But there is a specific class of people who survive every single time. They do not just survive, they thrive. They emerge from the ashes of national ruin wealthier than they entered it. We look at the modern Russian state and we see a riddle. We see sanctions that should cripple an economy. We see a war that drains the treasury. We see a currency that fluctuates violently. And yet the leaders remain untouched. The villas in Dubai multiply. The gold reserves grow. The control tightens. You have been told this is corruption. You have been told this is theft. But those are small words for a much larger mechanism. The pattern is unmistakable. The arithmetic is merciless. This is not an accident of history. It is a repeatable design feature of extractive empires. To understand why the elite in Moscow or any extractive capital never lose their standing, you must stop looking at the politics. You must look at the plumbing of the financial system. You must look at who holds the debt and who holds the asset, because this story did not begin in 1991. It did not begin in 1917. It began 2,000 years ago. The mechanism is ancient. The players change. The technology evolves. But the method of wealth extraction and insulation remains exactly the same. It happens in three distinct historical phases: peak dominance, the chosen monetary shortcut, and finally the flight to hard assets. We are going to walk through three specific moments in history where this exact pattern played out. We will see it in the marble halls of Rome. We will see it in the ports of imperial Spain. We will see it in the industrial heartland of Weimar Germany. And then we will map it step by step onto the current reality of the Russian Federation. The parallels are not just similar. They are mathematically identical. Here is the key. The elite do not need the nation to succeed in order to stay rich. They only need the mechanism of transfer to remain intact. Think about what that means. The first case study takes us to the archetype of all Western power structures, the Roman Empire, specifically the period stretching from the reign of Nero in 64 AD to the crisis of the 3rd century. Most historians focus on the battles, the mad emperors, or the burning of the city. But the real story, the story that explains the survival of the senatorial wealth while the empire crumbled, is a story of currency debasement and land accumulation. At the height of the Pax Romana, the Roman economy was built on the silver denarius. It was the reserve currency of the known world. A soldier could trust it. A merchant in Alexandria could trust it. It contained approximately 45 grams of pure silver. It was money. But the costs of maintaining a global hegemony were astronomical. The legions required payment. The borders required fortification. The bread and circuses required to keep the Roman mob from revolting were becoming a massive line item in the imperial budget. The turning point came under Nero. Faced with the fiscal crisis, he made a decision that would set the precedent for every collapsing empire to follow. He did not cut spending. He did not raise taxes on the powerful senatorial class who owned the vast majority of the land. Instead, he tampered with the coinage. He reduced the silver content of the denarius from 100% down to roughly 90%. To the average baker or stonemason, the coin looked the same. It felt the same, but the arithmetic changed. The state had effectively created free money by stealing a fraction of the value from every saver. In the empire, this was the chosen monetary shortcut, and once the seal was broken, the slide was inevitable. By the time we reached the reign of Septimius Severus in 193 AD, the silver content had dropped to 50%. By the crisis of the 3rd century, under the Emperor Gallienus, the coin was a copper slug washed in a thin layer of silver, containing less than 5% precious metal. The inflation was catastrophic. Prices for wheat and boots skyrocketed. The salary of a legionary was tripled, then quadrupled, yet it bought less and less. But here is where the pattern reveals itself. Who suffered? The soldier paid in debased coin suffered. The shopkeeper holding savings in denarii suffered, but the elite, the senators, the generals, the high-ranking bureaucrats, did not hold their wealth in currency. They understood the game. As the currency collapsed, the elite used their access to the state treasury to acquire the one thing that could not be debased: land. This was the era of the latifundia, massive industrial-scale estates that swallowed up the small family farms of Italy. The small farmers, bankrupt by inflation and taxation, sold their land for worthless coin to the very elites who were managing the debasement. We have records of senatorial wealth from this period that are staggering, while the empire fractured the private fortunes of the top 1%. Actually grew. They retreated to their fortified villas. They became self-sufficient city-states within the state. They stopped using the currency altogether, trading in gold bullion and raw commodities among themselves. The state crumbled, but the leaders remained rich. They had successfully insulated themselves from the consequences of their own policy. The incentive was clear: destroy the public currency to consolidate private real assets. Just like the Roman senators retreated to their latifundia, while the denarius turned to dust, the grandees of imperial Spain orchestrated a similar transfer of wealth during the 16th and 17th centuries. The Spanish Empire was the superpower of its age. The reward was privatized by the rich. Just like the Spanish grandees used inflation to crush the middle class and seize the land, the industrial tycoons of Weimar Germany in the 1920s, perfected the art of using inflation to acquire the entire industrial base of a nation. This is perhaps the most critical case study for understanding the modern Russian oligarch. The parallels are chilling. Following the defeat in World War I, Germany was saddled with unpayable war reparations. The government, fragile and desperate, chose the monetary shortcut. They printed marks to pay the workers of the Ruhr who were on strike against French occupation. They printed marks to buy foreign currency. They printed marks to keep the lights on. We all know the images of wheelbarrows full of cash. We know the stories of a cup of coffee costing 5,000 marks at 10 a.m. and 8,000 marks at 11 a.m. But while the grandmother's pension was wiped out and the war bonds became worthless paper, a specific group of men became the richest individuals in Europe. Enter Hugo Stinnes. He was an industrialist, a coal magnate, and a man who understood the arithmetic of inflation better than anyone else. Stinnes realized that in a hyperinflationary environment, cash is trash, but debt is a gift. His strategy was simple and ruthless. He borrowed massive amounts of papier marks from the Reichsbank. He used this borrowed money to buy hard assets, coal mines, steel mills, newspapers, shipping lines, hotels. He bought everything he could get his hands on. Then he waited. As the currency collapsed, the value of his debt evaporated. He would pay back a loan that was worth millions of dollars in real terms, with the equivalent of a postage stamp. This could be a war, a welfare state, or massive corruption. The budget deficit becomes structural, not cyclical. Stage 2 is the monetary shortcut. The leadership realizes that raising taxes is politically dangerous and cutting spending is impossible. So they turn to the central bank or the treasury. They begin to suppress interest rates. They begin to print. They decouple the currency from reality. Stage 3 is the asset lift. The newly created money does not flow evenly. It flows first to the connected elites, the banks, and the state contractors. This is known as the Cantillon effect. These insiders use the fresh capital to buy asset stocks. Real estate, gold before prices rise. The elite's net worth skyrockets on paper. Stage 4 is the inflationary breach. The money finally trickles down to the real economy. Prices for food, fuel, and labor begin to rise. The government blames speculators, foreign actors, or supply chains. They deny the monetary root. Cause Stage 5 is the flight to hard assets.
They panic buy anything that will hold value: cars, appliances, foreign currency. This accelerates the velocity of money, worsening the inflation. Stage 6 is the crack-up boom. The economy appears to be booming in nominal terms. The stock market hits all-time highs. Real estate prices are astronomical. But in real terms, the nation is getting poorer. The elite, having positioned themselves in Stage 3, are now fully insulated in hard assets and foreign jurisdictions. Stage 7 is the reset. The currency is finally abandoned or revalued. A new currency is issued. the middle-class savings are officially wiped out, but the elite, holding mines, factories, and land, simply reprice their assets in the new money. They have successfully transferred the wealth of the nation into their own pockets, just like Hugo Stinnes borrowed the mark into oblivion to own. The RUR, the modern Russian system, is designed to allow a tight circle of insiders to extract the natural wealth of the Eurasian landmass, while insulating themselves from the volatility of the ruble and the sanctions of the West. Current data suggest the Russian model is a sophisticated hybrid of the Spanish and Weimar. Examples: the Russian leaders in our title refers to the synthesis of the Silovekata, the security state Eledand, the oligarchs who manage the strategic assets. Here is the mechanism in the present day. Russia is a commodities superpower. It exports oil, gas, nickel, wheat, and fertilizer. These are hard assets. They are priced in dollars or yuan. On the global market, the revenue flows into the state giants. Gazprom, Rosneft, Rostec, the elites sit at the control points of these flows. When the oil price is high, the surplus is skimmed off into sovereign wealth funds, and many observers argue into a complex network of offshore shell companies and proxy accounts. This is the Spanish phase, the extraction of raw bullion. But look at what happens when the sanctions hit or the oil price drops. The ruble devalues in 2014 and again in 2022. The ruble lost significant value against the dollar. For the average Russian pensioner, this is a disaster. Imported medicine becomes expensive, technology prices soar, but for the exporter, for the state-connected oligarch, a devaluation is a windfall. They sell their oil for dollars, but they pay their workers and their taxes in depreciated rubles. Their costs go down in real terms while their revenue stays stable in hard currency terms. The devaluation of the national currency acts as a massive transfer of wealth from the Russian population to the commodity exporters. Furthermore, the Russian state has spent the last decade building a fortress balance sheet. They hoarded gold. Estimates range that the Russian central bank holds over 2,300 tons of gold. This is the Roman phase. While the currency the people use is managed and manipulated, the state reserves are in the ultimate hard asset. The internal economy is dominated by state contracts. Who builds the bridges? Who supplies the army? Who builds the pipelines? A small circle of vetted insiders. They are paid from the state coffers. If the state lacks funds, it prints or borrows these insiders, then take that capital and do exactly what Hugo Stinnes did. They do not keep it in rubles. They move it into real estate in Moscow or, where possible, into assets in friendly jurisdictions, Dubai, Turkey, Central Asia. The counter-argument is often made that sanctions have seized their yachts and frozen their accounts, that the West has broken the piggy bank, but this misses the scale of the system. The visible wealth, the London mansions, the super yachts, was merely the overflow. The core wealth is the control of the cash flow itself. As long as the oil flows and the gas pumps, the mechanism of extraction continues. The incentive for the Russian leader is not to create a broad-based consumer economy, which requires political freedom and rule of law. The incentive is to maintain the rent extraction machine. Under these constraints, the rational move for a member of the Russian elite is to support the regime that guarantees their position at the spigot, regardless of the damage to the broader economy. They are positioned to profit from volatility. Stability is not required for their wealth. Only control is the endgame for such a system. Follows a grimly predictable path. History offers us three potential outcomes. The first is controlled decline. This is the Soviet stagnation model, or the late Ottoman model. The state slowly eats its own capital. Infrastructure crumbles, the population shrinks, but the elite remain comfortable managing the decline, extracting the last bits of value from the decaying carcass. We saw this in the Brezhnev era. Anchored in the 1970s and 80s, the nomenclatura had access to special stores and Western goods, while the shelves were empty for the worker. The second is chaotic collapse. This is the 1917 scenario or the 1998 default. The pressure becomes too great, the currency hyperinflates, the security services fracture in this scenario. There is a violent reshuffling of the deck, but notice who wins in the chaos. The men with the guns and the men with the hard assets, the stins types, the strongmen. The wealth is not redistributed to the poor. It is simply seized by the most ruthless faction of the elite. The third is reset and restructure. This is the most likely modern path. The state introduces a new digital currency, perhaps a CBDC, central bank digital currency, to gain total control over the internal economy. They close the capital account completely. The population is locked into a digital token system, while the elite continue to trade commodities globally for hard assets. This creates a permanent two-tier society, the inner party with access to real resources and the outer party living in a closed monetary loop. The pattern is unmistakable from the Palatine Hill to the Kremlin. The logic of power does not change. The currency is for the people, the gold and the land are for the leaders. The only variable is timing and pain. Subscribe to the channel.